Special needs also doesn't make sense to me because I'm not really sure why my needs are more special than someone else's needs. I always say, like, my actual special needs are please fan me and feed me grapes.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
That's a great need.
Yeah.
I am starting to feel like I have a need like that as well.
Right?
Welcome back to Pick Class and Gym Class. This week, I'm talking to Emily Ladau, a wheelchair-using communications consultant and disability activist whose work has been recognized by the American Association of People with Disabilities. Why don't you give me a little bit of information about yourself?
So I am a disability rights activist, a communications consultant, writer, speaker, podcaster, editor. I wear a lot of hats, but I do it all within the niche of disability-related advocacy.
Okay, cool. Before I get into the meat of the conversation, I did see a fun fact about you.
Oh boy, here it comes.
Can you tell me about Sesame Street?
I can tell you about.
Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street?
So, yes, when I was 10, I was on Sesame Street. My mother likes to tell me that I'm still milking this and I should really stop now.
No, you should milk it forever.
So I went to a summer camp for kids with disabilities, and they were looking for someone to come on the show who had a disability to replace the child who was acting on the show previously who had a disability, but she was aging out. And so they called my summer
that's
camp.
Brutal.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So they called my summer camp, and they were like, we're looking for talent. And they were like, we have an annoying, precocious, 8 or 9-year-old kid.
She's not shy.
So I did one interview, got a call back, did the second interview, and I ended up getting the part. So that was really my first adventure in disability-related advocacy. It just happened to be on a very public platform.
That's amazing. Who's the biggest diva out of all the Sesame Street characters?
Probably Oscar. Definitely a diva.
I believe that. Who's your favorite?
All of them, and I'm not kidding. I love all of them. But Elmo did give me a little kiss on the cheek, so he,
Things got serious.
Yeah,
I see.
It's real.
But that's a pretty diplomatic answer for the most part. But I see a little sweet spot for Elmo. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So did Sesame Street, was that kind of the thing that launched you into the disability rights life that you find yourself in now?
I think that when I was 10, I was not at all conscious of the meaning behind a platform like that.
Yeah.
I was just enjoying myself and probably not appreciating what was going on enough, to be quite honest. But when I got older, kind of looking back on it, I realized that was a jumping off point that most people don't have the privilege to experience. And so I think it was kind of the start for me of realizing that being outspoken about disability instead of hiding it was how I was going to live my life.
Yeah, and I think Sesame Street does a really good job of showing diversity, but in a really welcoming way. I think a lot of times, as far as disability advocacy goes, sometimes I feel like it's just you feel like you're just angrily shouting into a void.
Oh my God, yes.
And Sesame Street's a good platform because that's an inclusive environment to see somebody in. So that's super cool.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean about shouting into the void, because this happens to me all the time where it's you think that when you're tweeting something, you're making this big difference, and then you realize that you're just in your bubble. And so my goal with activism lately has been to get outside of that bubble and remind people that we don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I definitely know what you mean about Twitter. Sometimes I'll go on Twitter and I'm like, this is the big one. I'm like, this is profound. And you see no activity on that one at all.
This is going to go viral.
And you're like, no one loved that besides me. And it does feel like shouting into a void. And I think sometimes I'm slowly coming into the world of disability advocacy kind of the same way. It's not necessarily something that I feel like people set out to do. You just kind of live your life, and then all of a sudden you're presented with opportunities and you're like,
yeah,
I guess this is what I do now.
Yeah, well, I think that the blessing and curse of disability is that, especially when it's visible, you're sort of thrown into being an advocate whether you want to be or not. like so people can see your prosthetic and people can see my wheelchair, and so that automatically makes us like a walking and rolling teachable moment.
Exactly.
Basically.
We are the mascots of disability everywhere we go. So going on with life, kind of falling into this disability advocacy world, you started a blog. Will you tell me about your blog?
Yeah, so after college, I did an internship program in Washington, D.C., and I was paired with a mentor who is also a writer, blogger, podcaster, and she was like, listen, you need to capitalize on the skills that you've been gaining while you're here. Why don't you start a blog? So I went home, brainstormed the name with my family, and my mom came up with the name Words I Wheel By, kind of a play on Words I Live By. And so I started this blog and was pretty much just excited that like my grandma was going to read it.
Yeah. Like, thanks, Grandma.
Yeah. And, she'd call me and be like, I read your latest blog post. And I was like, thank you. Somebody knows what I'm writing.
Yes. Not shouting into the voice this time.
Exactly.
At least Grandma's getting it.
But then I actually got a comment from someone who I did not know at all. And I can't remember the context of the comment, but I just know that there was this huge impactful moment where I was like, someone I don't know was also affected by what I had to say. And this is really powerful for me to see that I'm somewhat getting beyond the void, even if it's one person. And so after that moment, I just kind of kept the ball rolling with my writing, and it's been a journey. I know that sounds so cliche, but it has been a journey for me.
I love that. So your blog, did it start out kind of more as just like, this is my life, this is everyday stuff?
So it was actually pretty focused on disability issues.
Okay.
But to be fair, that kind of is my everyday life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it was kind of a
into
blog about
issues
my
a lot.
life. Yeah. So it was originally just sort of a platform for me to mull over things that were affecting me or that were current events or things like that from a disability perspective. But it sort of snowballed from there into a freelance writing career where I became someone who, I guess I still have trouble wrapping my mind around this, but became a go-to to write about disability issues.
So the blog kind of just projected into a lot of other projects from there.
Yes.
One of my personal favorites is the Vice thing that you worked on.
Yeah, so there was a video that I did with Vice. It was me and two other people who have disabilities, one of whom is a good friend of mine. And it was sort of talking about how to interact with someone who has a disability without being weird about it, which is a concept to people.
Yeah, it really is. That is something that, like, I feel like my story with disability is weird because I acquired it. So I feel like I've seen both sides of the table. Because at first, like, I was never around disability. It was nothing my family talked about. It made me uncomfortable when I would see it, like, just in the world. And maybe, that's probably because, one, I'm young and my parents, bless them, but they did not do their best, and having me interact with people.
I get you.
But, and then, like, all of a sudden, I joined the club, and you see the other side of the coin. And it is funny to be like, oh, no, like, I'm still, like, a human person.
Yeah. We are the only club that you can join at any time.
Yeah.
And I always have to remind people that's not actually a threat.
Yeah, you're like, we're not here to get you, but, like, you can.
But, no, I completely relate to that because even though I was born with my disability, I still went through a very, very long period of time where I was like, if I'm in the room with someone else who also has a visible disability, then everyone will realize that I have a disability, and that just makes it really weird, and I'm really self-conscious, and I don't want anyone looking at me like that. So, yeah, I mean, it took me a really long time to be like, yeah, I'm in a wheelchair. What are you going to do?
That's it. Yeah, you're like, that's it. I just use it. It's not like, this isn't.
It just exists. Although I always say it's just like the tank on my butt. You'll get used to it.
Yay. I like that. Tell me a little bit more about Rooted in Rights. Did that kind of stem from the blog? Like, what is the origin of that?
Yeah, so I have spent many years at this point sharing my own story through writing, and I realized that words are a really powerful tool for educating people. And I try to talk about disability in a way that's accessible to other people. So I always say that if you want the world to be accessible to the disability community, then you need to make the experiences of disability accessible to the world. And not everybody likes that approach because they feel like it puts the burden on us to teach. But at the same time, I don't mind extending to people stories about my experience if it will help increase understanding and acceptance. So when I realized that writing was so powerful for me personally, I realized that hopefully I could bring that to other people. And so I was invited to be the editor-in-chief of Rooted in Rights. And
It's like such a grown-up status.
Right, yeah.
You made it.
I made it, or they just handed me the title and were like, here, do what you want with it. But, so originally I actually was not going to take on that project. I said no. I had major imposter syndrome, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. But then I was asked a second time, and I was like, okay, guess we're going to do this. So I built the blog basically from the ground up, and we publish perspectives from disabled people all over the world, people of multiple marginalized identities, people who talk about experiences from a disability perspective that we don't normally think about, whether it's sex or parenting, employment, education, whatever the case may be. So now it's less about sharing my story and more about amplifying the stories of other people.
Yeah, making it a collective experience.
Yeah. Because if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. And people don't realize that. So it's really important for me to help other people get their stories out there so that you're hearing from a multitude of perspectives instead of just one person telling you what it's like. Because what it's like for me is not what it's like for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on and on.
That's the thing about, like, when I get asked a lot about para, because I'm a significantly more impacted category than, like, a below-the-knee amputee. I've gotten asked, like, my race times, and I'll tell them, and I've had people be like, well, that's not that fast. You're like, well, you're right. Objectively, not that fast. For me, pretty good. But I've told people, too, as well as in para, it's really hard to organize those categories because not one disability is created equal. Like, even the people that I am kind of grouped with, there's a lot of nuances. There's just a lot, and the experience is different. And that's so true. I've never thought about people like that. You do have a lot of interactions with people. They're like, my aunt was in a wheelchair one time, but she died when I was 6. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so you definitely get
you're
it.
Like, yeah, you're like,
or the person who's like,
it.
I broke my pinky once. So I know how hard it is for you. And I'm like, first of all, I don't want your sympathy or your pity. Second of all, you don't actually understand.
Yeah, you're like, that's really far from my experience, but I'm sorry for your loss. And you're like, I'm really, really sorry for your grief, for your hard time.
Sorry about your great uncle's dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, so this is why I really hate terminology like differently abled or special needs. It just drives me.
Yeah, you're like, say wall. Disabled. It's not a bad word.
Yeah. Like, I am disabled. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, you're like, I know.
Yeah, like
someone told me.
It's not a surprise.
Yeah, I found out.
Yeah, and also like differently abled makes no sense to me because everyone has different abilities. So like if you're not disabled, you are still differently abled. So it just kind of cancels it out. I don't get it.
It doesn't, yeah. It makes your head hurt.
Yeah, and then special needs also doesn't make sense to me because I'm not really sure why my needs are more special than someone else's needs. I always say, like, my actual special needs are please fan me and feed me grapes.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
That's a great need.
Yeah.
I am starting to feel like I have a need like that as well.
Right? Yeah. Like, the other day I was talking with a friend of mine and she was like, yeah, my special need and I want people to drive me around all the time. I was like, exactly.
Ugh, yes.
Exactly. So that's what I think of when I think of special. I'm not special. I'm like a person. It's really patronizing because if you're calling someone special or if you're calling them inspiring, it should really be for a reason. And that's what people are missing. I'm not inspiring because I got out of bed this morning.
Yeah.
I'm inspiring because I
gave a bomb speech.
Yeah.
South by
maybe
Southwest.
I did that today.
Yeah.
You know, And that was great. And then if you say I'm inspiring, I'm going to be like, thank you. And then I'm going to go back and like tuck that away in my little,
now, yeah.
yeah, tuck it in my little compliment pocket and go on with my day. But when people are like, I am so inspired by you, you're so brave, I'm like, why? Because I also brushed my teeth this morning.
So as we go on like with the world of disability advocacy, like the more that I realized that I was like, I'm being an advocate, my life experience has been like that disability transcends so many other things. And I know that you're on the board for WHAM NYC. Will you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's the NYC chapter of an organization called Women, Action, and the Media. And my goal was to bring the disability perspective to an organization that's already focusing on diverse representation in media, but also for it to be not just a give, but also a take in a very positive way. And that I recognize that although I'm disabled, there are many minority experiences that I cannot relate to. And so I really wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, bigger than that bubble of disability that we're always stuck in, so that we could focus on how people of different minorities can all be working together to lift each other up and amplify the work that we're doing. So for me, being on WHAM NYC's board has been another opportunity to step outside that sort of pigeonholed route that I've been taking when it comes to disability advocacy.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's so funny because I always tell people, I'm like, the weird thing about disability, even though we're a minority, we're the world's largest minority.
My favorite statistic.
We take everybody. Like, yeah, I'm like, but we are equal opportunity, so we'll take everybody. It doesn't matter what you look like, who you're attracted to, we'll take it all. We'll take them all.
Yeah, I joke about that a lot. On the one hand, it's actually kind of sad that we have to like keep going back to we're the world's largest minority because we don't have other statistics right now. That's like our go-to statistic. Yeah. It's like
we're the biggest.
Yeah, like we're 20% of the population. 1 in 5 people in the United States has a disability. You know, like it's all about how
ambiguous,
big we are. Mm-hmm. But you know, then you start looking at statistics like media representation and you realize that there isn't any or hardly any. And so that's why being outside of just the void that I'm constantly talking into with disability has been really important to me because I want to see those statistics. I want to see that representation. I want it to be the norm, you know, the rule and not the exception.
Well, yeah, and also because, and you're going to have to tell me your opinion on seeing disability in the media because like, you know, it's 2019, like Hollywood, like they're trying, but it's still like, it's hard, I feel like still to see disability portrayed in the media where the character, like the whole identity is just who they, about like their personality and not the fact that they are just filling the disability quota criteria.
Yeah, it would be great to see a fully developed character where it's not like, this is our disabled character, or not someone who's just there to make you cry or just there to make you feel inspired. It, you know, we're lacking the nuance and the complexity right now of the human experience when you have a disability, and that's a pretty big bummer. Honestly,
it's a huge bummer. And also, yeah, it's like you just never see like, how come we're never the lead, like we're never the hero. You never see, I don't know, like I'm just like, in my life I'm the hero. So I mean, in your life,
I am the princess.
Yeah, like this, I'm the lead character in my life, and
that's a real thing though. Like growing up, not having anybody who looks like you, and the media makes you think that you're not worthy of a job, you're not worthy of love, you're not worthy of succeeding in life, and you know when that's the narrative that's driven home, and then you know. You have to fight against it and be like, no, I am worthy of all these things. That's a lot to grapple with.
It's a big hurdle, and I know like when I do some of my work, some of the responses I get are actually from parents because I never thought about even that as a little kid because like we never had people that looked like us basically growing up. You're like, well, I just want to do this, so I guess I'll go do it. And I think like the idea of having a role model that does more than just exists out of inspiration and just blows kisses and stuff. Like that's so important to have people that are dynamic and smart and changing the world, but also that that we look different than what you normally see.
Yeah, so I'm lucky in that my mom and my uncle have the same disability that I do. So I grew up around two adults who were already killing it.
Yeah.
So
Slaying it.
yeah,
Nice.
so I was like,
Nice.
I know I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the back of my mind, I know I'm gonna be okay. But other than that, there was not a whole lot of disability in my life, and so I just didn't see people who were killing it beyond that very narrow scope.
Yeah.
I wish I had that growing up. I wish that someone had showed me that looking into the future, you are going to have a successful career, you're going to have relationships, you're going to figure out a life path.
It's important, I think. Do you find that you have parents or kids writing you as well, in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that parents of kids with disabilities are still fed the message that their kid is going to live a miserable life. And so having parents reach out to me and be like, oh, but you're actually doing cool things. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I'm killing it.
Your kid's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Fine and easy are very different things. You're going to be fine. Not going to be easy, but you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, and whose life is easy, honestly?
Exactly.
No one's life is easy.
Yeah. So I just want people to be realistic.
Yeah.
There needs to be a happy medium. I think sometimes the stereotype that disabled people are happy all the time, and then there's the stereotype that we're really, really bitter. What about the in-between? Because one day I'm happy and one day I'm bitter. Sometimes I'm both within 5 minutes.
Exactly. You're like, I could be everything.
Yeah, but it's me and everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's not exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. So when parents and kids reach out to me, I just want them to know that, you're going to handle this.
Yeah.
It might not be super easy, and I don't mean to sound like a motivational speaker because I actually don't like the whole, you could do it, but you can.
You can do it. Yeah, you'll be fine. Yeah. It doesn't need to be, fireworks and stuff behind you. But,
exactly.
I feel that. Emily, so you do you got your hands, in a lot of different piles. You also have your own podcast.
I do, yes. So me and one of my very best friends in the whole world, Kyla Ketchadurian, co-host a podcast called The Accessible Stall. So basically it's just our place to keep it real about disability issues.
That's amazing. The Accessible Stall. Phenomenal. So I'm relatively new to podcasting, and do you have any tips for me as I continue on this journey?
So the biggest thing that I think I've learned from podcasting is don't be afraid to really speak your mind about things. Put some controversial opinions out there. Be willing to start a dialogue. Be willing to listen to the feedback that people give you. Because I have definitely said some things while podcasting that I've realized afterwards were something that I needed to learn from because it wasn't the right thing to say. There have been some times where I felt very passionately about something, but had my mind changed about it through podcasting. So I think that podcasting is a learning opportunity. And I'm well over 2 years into it with my co-host now. And it's a different adventure every single time we do
I love it.
Because there's always a new topic to talk about. There's always a new way to look at something. And there's always people who are messaging us and pushing back on what we're saying or agreeing with what we're saying or even saying that they're feeling less alone because they were listening to our show. So yeah, it's about learning, listening, and connecting with other people.
I love that. Being open to perspectives
other
than your own.
Yeah, podcasting is a mind-opening thing. It really is, because there have been so many times when I've shared my own personal experiences, feeling alone about it, and had somebody send a message to the show and be like, me too, I thought I was, the only one, but this happens to me. And it feels good.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that solidarity. We forget. It seems like such an isolating experience, but again, with the blessings of and the curses, but the blessings of social media, of podcasts, of being connected in the world that we are now, it makes it more accessible.
Yeah, podcasting is about making different perspectives more accessible to people. And I think it's a gift. I love podcasting. It's actually right now my only thing that I consistently do that's a passion project for me. Everything else
It's turned into work.
Yeah, it's always work. The podcast is a lot of work, especially because when you're in such a niche, when you're talking about disability all the time, it's hard to get out of that niche. So we work really hard to get out of it. But I really enjoy podcasting, and it's probably the one thing that I don't think anyone can take away from me is that it's my passion to be able to do that.
Emily, thanks for being on the show. You know, if, in the future, if you ever need a guest on your show, I'll be in New York soon, so.
Yeah, have your people call my people.
Definitely will do.
And thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for checking out this week's episode. Head to dcpentertainment.com to listen and subscribe to the Pick Class and Gym Class podcast, where you can hear an extended conversation with Emily.